I don't know why those words, her words, stuck to me harder than the grease under my nails. Maybe it was because she said them like she hadn't meant to, like they slipped out before she could stop herself. I rejected my husband's gift, and that night he packed his bags. That was all. No explanation. No smoothing over. She just said it, almost under her breath, while running her hand across the spine of an old book that wasn't for sale. I was behind the counter, pretending to type something into the shop's computer, but really just trying to make sense of her. The bookstore smelled faintly of paper and dust, the kind of smell that made everything feel slowed down, older than it was. Most days, it was quiet, except when she came in. Her name was Claire, mid-40s, though the way she carried herself made the number irrelevant. Some people just fill a room, even when they're silent. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't the kind of woman you notice for the clothes she wore, though today's navy sweater clung to her like it had known her shape for years. It was something else. The way she stood, straight-backed, but not stiff. The way her eyes searched the shelves like they were hiding secrets. I'd seen her a few times before. She never bought much, just browsed slowly, almost deliberately, like the books gave her a reason not to rush home. That afternoon, I asked if she needed help finding anything. A simple question, nothing loaded. But when her eyes flicked to mine, there was this pause, longer than politeness required. "No," she said finally, voice low, like she was conserving it. "Just looking." Her fingers lingered on the spine of that same book. She didn't open it, didn't even slide it from the shelf, just touched it the way someone might touch a scar. And then she said it, the line that's still burning a hole in my head. I should have let it pass. Should have nodded, made a neutral sound, kept the safe distance that clerks and customers are supposed to. But instead, I asked, "Do you regret it?" The second the words left my mouth, I hated myself for them. Who was I to pry into a stranger's life? Her lips parted slightly, then closed again. She didn't answer, just looked at me, long enough that I started shifting on my feet, wishing I could take the question back. Finally, she smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that makes things lighter. It was the kind that hides something. "Regret," she said softly, "is a luxury." And then she walked past me, straight to the register, and bought a cheap paperback like that was the only reason she'd come in at all. But the weight of her glance stayed with me. I bagged her book, tried not to look too closely at her hands when she took it from me. There was no wedding ring. Maybe there had been once. Maybe there still was, at home in a drawer. She didn't say goodbye when she left, just nodded faintly, like I was a thought she'd come back to later. The bell above the door chimed, and the shop was quiet again. Too quiet. I should have gone back to work, but I just stood there, staring at the shelf where her fingertips had rested. That stupid book no one ever buys. I don't know why. I only know that I couldn't stop thinking about the way she said it, and the silence that came after. Like she'd left me holding something I didn't understand, and maybe wasn't supposed to. The shop's front door jammed on rainy days, and that afternoon she stood outside, tugging at it while I scrambled from behind the counter to help. By the time I reached her, she'd already stepped back, her arms folded, waiting. "Get stuck when it rains," I said, pulling hard until the door gave with a screech. Her lips curved in a brief, tired smile. "Seems everything does, eventually." I wasn't sure if she meant the door or something else. Probably something else. She stepped inside, shaking the rain from her hair. Drops clung to her sweater, darker patches spreading across the sleeves. She looked out of place, almost too composed for the cracked floorboards and flickering fluorescent lights. "Do you need a towel?" I asked before thinking. She shook her head. "No, I'm fine." But she wasn't. Or maybe I just wanted to see it that way. There was a faint smudge beneath her eye, like she hadn't slept well. Her movements were slower than before, deliberate in a way that felt less like control and more like exhaustion. She drifted toward the counter instead of the shelves. "Do you carry old repair manuals?" I blinked. "For cars." "For anything," she said, eyes scanning the register's surface as if avoiding mine. Sometimes the old books help more than new instructions. I led her to the far corner, where a thin stack of tattered guides leaned against each other. She crouched to examine them, her sweater pulling loose at the wrist. That's when I noticed her hands. Small, elegant, but with faint lines and a tiny burn scar near the thumb. Not the kind of hands you'd expect to belong to someone so careful. She picked one book, flipped a few pages, then closed it. Not what I need. Her voice was softer now, like she'd run out of the strength to keep it steady. I wanted to ask what she was fixing, what she needed saving. Instead, I said, sometimes they hide what you're looking for in the middle. You can sit, if you want. I'll bring the others. She hesitated, long enough for me to think she'd refuse. But then she sat at the small table near the window, the one no one ever used. When I brought over the stack, she gave a laugh, not loud, not careless, just a small, startled sound. You really think I'll read all these? I think you needed a reason to sit down, I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes flicked to mine, just a second too long. Then she looked away, pretending to study the covers. Silence settled between us. Not heavy, not empty either. I busied myself wiping the counter that didn't need wiping. But I couldn't shake the image of her sitting there, rain still clinging to her sleeves, hands resting on a book she had no intention of buying. When she finally rose, she didn't take any of them. Just closed the top one gently, like she was putting something back in place. Thank you, she said, quiet, almost to herself. And as she walked out into the rain, I realized I wasn't sure if she was thanking me for the books or for not asking the question she wasn't ready to answer. The rain hammered so hard against the front windows that even the bell above the door rattled. I'd started stacking new arrivals on the shelves, but she lingered by the counter, tracing circles on the wood with her fingertip as though she was waiting for something she wouldn't name. You'll be here a while if you're hoping it'll let up, I said. She didn't laugh, just glanced at the darkened street. It doesn't matter. I don't mind waiting. I don't know what made me say it, but I offered her tea. Old paper cups and a tin of chamomile we kept for long shifts. She accepted with a small nod, wrapping both hands around the cup even before it cooled. Her fingers looked smaller that way, fragile in a way I hadn't noticed before. We sat at the table by the window, the same one she'd chosen last time. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the rain and the occasional groan of the old ceiling fan. You're quiet, she said suddenly. I shrugged, caught off guard. I think too much. She tilted her head, studying me. Dangerous habit. It should have ended there, but then she leaned in, elbows on the table, lowering her voice. My husband used to say the same thing. That I think too much. That I make problems where none exist. The way she said used to tighten something in my chest. I wanted to ask, is he gone? Did you send him away? Did he leave? But I only said, maybe you were just seeing what he couldn't. Her eyes held mine then, steady, searching. For a second I thought she might actually tell me the truth, whatever it was. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure she could hear it. But then her phone buzzed. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. She glanced at the screen, and her face shifted, something stiff and unreadable. I should take this, she murmured, standing so quickly her chair scraped the floor. I tried not to listen, but the walls were thin. A man's voice, muffled but sharp, leaked through the receiver. She spoke quietly, too quiet, until at one point her voice broke. I can't do this right now. The words hit harder than they should have. When she returned, she didn't sit, just gathered her bag, her tea still half full on the table. Thank you, she said again, the same way she had before, like I'd given her more than I had. And then, as she turned to go, her hand brushed mine on the counter. Not deliberately, not clumsy either. Just a graze of skin, warm enough to freeze me in place. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. And then the storm broke open louder, forcing her to pull away. She left with her shoulders drawn tight, and I stood there with the ghost of her hand still burning against mine, wondering if she'd noticed the same spark I did, or if it was just me, inventing a story out of nothing. She came back on a Thursday evening, late enough that the shop was empty. The rain had cleared, but the air was heavy, as if the storm had only moved inside with us. She didn't browse this time, didn't even pretend. She just stood by the counter, her hands tucked into the sleeves of her sweater, watching me. "You're still here," she said finally. I tried to smile. "It's my job. That's not what I meant." Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. They flicked across my face like she was trying to decide how much to give away. The silence stretched until I couldn't stand it. "You've been coming here a lot." Her lips parted like she might argue, but she didn't. She just lowered her gaze to the counter. "Sometimes I need a place that doesn't ask questions." I swallowed hard. And yet here I am asking. That pulled a breath of a laugh from her, but it wasn't joy. More like resignation. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, then let her hands fall uselessly to her sides. "What are we doing?" she whispered. The words landed heavy between us. Not accusation, not curiosity, something rawer, like she herself didn't know the answer. I froze. Every possible response felt too much or not enough. "I don't know," I admitted. My voice cracked, betraying me. "But I keep thinking about it. About you." Her eyes lifted to mine then, sharp, unflinching. For a second, the air between us felt charged, too close. I could hear the hum of the old refrigerator in the back, my own uneven breathing. Nothing else. "You shouldn't," she said softly. But her hands betrayed her. They tightened around the strap of her bag, white-knuckled, like she was holding herself together. "I can't help it," I said before I could stop myself. The silence that followed was unbearable. Not empty, alive. Every second stretched thin, stretched dangerous. She stepped back, just slightly, like space itself was the only barrier she could still control. "This isn't fair," she murmured. "You're too young. I'm too everything else." I wanted to argue, to tell her none of it mattered. But the words caught in my throat, stuck behind fear and something else. Respect, maybe. Or cowardice. Instead, I said nothing. Just looked at her, letting the quiet speak for me. Her chest rose and fell too quickly. She pressed her lips together, as if swallowing words she'd regret. When she finally turned to leave, she paused at the door. The bell above it hung still, waiting. Without looking back, she said, barely audible, "You make me feel like I still exist." And then she was gone. The shop felt hollow without her, like all the quiet had lost its weight. I found myself glancing at the door every time the bell rang, only to feel the sting of disappointment when it was someone else, someone ordinary. Then, one evening, the bell chimed, and there she was. Different, though. Her shoulders sloped more than usual, and she clutched a folded envelope in her hand like it might slip away if she loosened her grip. "I shouldn't be here," she said, stepping inside. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were glassy. But I didn't want to be anywhere else. I didn't know what to do with that. So I just nodded, clearing a space on the counter as if that could somehow make room for her too. She set the envelope down between us. It was already opened, the paper inside creased and softened like it had been read too many times. She didn't explain right away, just stared at it, then at me, as though testing whether I was safe enough to tell. Finally, she said, "My husband left me a letter. The night he walked out." The words hit harder than I expected. My throat tightened, but I stayed quiet, waiting. "He said I reminded him of someone he used to love," she continued, voice low, trembling at the edges. "Not who I was, who I used to be. He couldn't bear the reminder anymore." She laughed, but it was sharp, humorless. Imagine that, being left behind because you're too much of a memory. I couldn't move. My hands pressed flat against the counter, anchoring me. "And then you," she whispered, eyes locking with mine. "You look at me in ways he stopped looking years ago. You listen when I don't even want to talk. And I don't know if it terrifies me or saves me." Her honesty shook something loose inside me. I wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, to tell her she wasn't invisible, not to me. But I didn't. Instead, I said, softly, "Maybe he left because he couldn't see you anymore. But I do." The silence that followed was devastating. She blinked hard, one tear escaping before she wiped it away too quickly, as though she'd promised herself She wouldn't let me see her break. She gathered the letter, folded it again with shaking fingers, and slipped it back into her bag. "Don't make me believe that," she said finally. "Because I might." And then she turned, her figure silhouetted in the doorway's dim light, leaving me with a truth that rattled me long after the bell above the door stopped ringing. She returned late, so late the shop should have been closed. I'd been finishing the last of the receipts. Lights dimmed, when the door creaked open and she slipped inside. "You're not supposed to be open," she said. "I'm not." Her smile was faint, tired. She didn't move further in, just stood there, as though deciding whether to stay or turn back. "I keep telling myself I shouldn't come here anymore," she whispered. And yet, the words trailed off. I didn't rush her. I just pulled out the chair at the small table by the window. She hesitated, then sat, folding her hands in front of her. Her knuckles were pale. The quiet stretched between us, not heavy, not unbearable, just honest. Finally, she spoke, her voice breaking the stillness like fragile glass. "I can't undo the years, the choices, the pieces I lost along the way." She looked down, fingers trembling slightly. "But when I sit here, I don't feel broken. Not completely." I swallowed hard, searching for words that wouldn't sound rehearsed or cheap. "You don't have to be whole for me to see you." Her gaze rose, steady and raw. She didn't smile, didn't laugh, just studied me like I was a mirror she hadn't dared to face before. Slowly, carefully, I reached across the table. My hand stopped just short of hers, waiting. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then her fingers slipped forward, brushing mine. Not a grasp, not a claim, just contact. Warm, human, real. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to explain. She leaned back slightly, exhaling as though she'd been holding her breath for years. "Maybe this is wrong," she murmured. "Maybe," I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. "But it doesn't feel like it." Her eyes softened, glassy under the dim light. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let her hand rest fully against mine, her palm against my skin, fragile but firm in its choice. We sat like that, silent, the storm outside long gone, but its echo still inside us. No declarations, no promises, just the quiet collapse into something neither of us could deny anymore. When she finally stood, she didn't let go right away. Her thumb brushed the back of my hand, one small, final stroke, like sealing a pact neither of us would dare name aloud. At the door, she paused, half turned toward me, her voice low, unsteady. "Don't forget this," she said. And then she was gone. It's strange, looking back now, how something so quiet could rearrange me so completely. I used to think love had to be loud to be real, that it needed fireworks, confessions, some grand proof to mean anything. But she taught me the opposite, that sometimes it's the pauses, the unfinished sentences, the way silence hangs between two people that tells the truth louder than words ever could. Claire didn't stay in my life the way I once imagined she might. There were no promises, no neat ending wrapped in ribbons. But what we shared in that dim little bookstore gave me something I didn't know I'd been searching for. The understanding that to be seen, even for a moment, can change everything. She carried regret, history, and a kind of ache I couldn't fix, and maybe I was foolish to think I could. But I also know this. When her hand rested against mine that night, she wasn't invisible anymore. And I wasn't just a boy playing at love. We didn't collapse into some impossible romance. Instead, we walked away carrying pieces of each other, pieces that still echo in me when I pass that corner table by the window, or when rain makes the shop door stick, the way it always did. Sometimes I wonder if she thinks of me, if the memory of our silence ever sneaks back into her days the way it does mine. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe what matters is that we were brave enough, for a moment, to exist fully in each other's sight. Love doesn't always ask to be owned or defined. Sometimes it just asks to be acknowledged, quietly, before it slips back into the world. And that's enough. It has to be. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?